Liam Halligan has been crunching those numbers. You've had a chance to just look a bit deeper into what the report's saying today.
Yeah, so we've been highlighting for weeks on GB News the fact that food price inflation has been screaming ahead, even though wholesale food prices have been coming down. And I wouldn't say I'm relieved, but it's certainly telling that that's indeed what's been happening officially in these numbers. As I said earlier, in February, the year to February inflation was 10.4%, the headline CPI, Consumer Price Index number, down only to 10.1% in March. And that will mean the government isn't able to put forward this narrative that interest rates have peaked, the next move in rates is down. This is going to hit consumer business sentiment. Food price inflation, it's not 10.1%, which general inflation is. In February, it was 18.2%. And in March, it's gone up to 19.2%, a material increase. So food prices are actually not just going up, they are accelerating. Even though, as I've said many, many, many times, wholesale food prices are coming down. And this is a very politically sensitive price, of course.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so just for someone very simple like me, if something cost £1 a year ago, it's £1.18 today. The same item.
Food.
That's right. If it's food.
Yeah,
if it's food. And that's on average. I mentioned that Which survey yesterday, which has now been entirely borne out and officially confirmed by the ONS. The Which survey of 26,000 goods yesterday said that there were things like simple loaves of bread that were up 60%. There were 8 sausages that were up 75%. And we're not talking about at the posh end.
Yeah.
We're talking about basic staples in some of the food discounters.
Yeah. You're talking about porridge, you're talking about cheese,
That's
you're
right.
talking about semi-skimmed milk.
And, of course, the less well-off pay disproportionately a much higher share of their income, whether it's benefit or wage income, on food, but also on energy. And, of course, you've had energy price inflation and on housing. The second biggest increase in inflation has been in restaurants and cafes. That's up by over 11% as well. Housing up by over 11%. So food and housing, the basics of life, it's very, very difficult to sell this as an economic success when the cost of living squeeze is still biting, and biting most significantly on less well-off people on the essentials of life.
It's also very difficult to settle wage claims if you're the government.
This is going to make it a lot harder for the government to address that industrial action. This is going to really embolden a lot of the trade unions who have been pushing for double-digit wage rises.
Liam, what is behind the cost of food? Because we heard from food producers this was to do with the cost of energy, but we are seeing the cost of energy is going down. So why is that not being passed on in terms of those producers and therefore to the consumers buying food?
Well, when you think about when food appears in your supermarkets, it's not just about the food itself. And as I've said, wholesale food prices on global markets and on national markets have been coming down a lot. For 12 months in a row, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Index has been falling. But I guess the food producers, the food retailers would say, yes, but food production also involves lots of labour. The cost of labour has been going up. It involves lots of packaging. The cost of that's been going up, the cost of transport as well. But I don't think anything can justify this kind of runaway food price inflation that we're seeing at the moment, when in general inflation, albeit slowly, is coming down.
So, if I was the PM or sitting on the cabinet there, I'd just want to call in a number of people into 10 Downing Street, set them down and say, what's going on here? And those people, I suppose we're looking at the head of the supermarket.
I would get the big supermarket bosses in and say, you know, the convention is you do compete, you know, price of milk's coming down. Indeed, one of our major food retailers very symbolically lowered the price of milk last week for the first time since 2020. Maybe they knew this was coming. I'm not saying that there's wrongdoing there. They're not here to defend themselves. But I would want to know, if I was the Prime Minister, what's actually happening here. Why is it that there's this completely stark contrast between tumbling wholesale food prices and accelerating retail food prices? There is nothing more sensitive in any political system than the price of food. There aren't many laws in economics, but that's one of them.
Yeah, and just you touched on it, but what does this mean in terms of interest rates? The Bank of England will have to make a decision based on these inflation figures.
There is no interest rate decision this month. The Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England meets 8 times a year. This is one of the months that it doesn't meet. It will next meet in early May, but we're at 4.25% now, and people like me have been saying for weeks, if inflation falls into single digits, then maybe there won't be another interest rate rise. It's going to be very hard to not do another interest rate rise now when inflation is still over 5 times the Bank of England's 2% target and down only marginally on the month before.
Liam Halligan there with lots of cheery news.